"Your room is just a tiny space that should be enough for you," my mother-in-law said with a sneer, seemingly enjoying looking down on me. "I am a working housewife living with my husband, Howard, and we have one son. Now that our son has grown up and found a job, I thought my ties with my in-laws, with whom I've had conflicts since my son was born, would lessen. However, one day Howard brought his parents home without any prior notice. "Why did you suddenly bring Mom and Dad here?" I asked, astounded by my husband's unilateral decision. Then he dropped another bombshell. "We need to renovate the house too. We have to make rooms for my parents to live in." So my mother-in-law had the audacity to suggest that a tiny room would be enough for me, looking down on me as if I deserved no better. At that moment, the commander in my head decided it was time to part ways with this family. "All right then, I guess it's divorce," I said. My father-in-law smirked, husband earning $7 per hour, at my words. For the first time, he spoke up. "Don't make such a boring joke." "What's so funny about it?" I retorted. "Whether he believes it or not is his prerogative, but he will understand in time. My words are no joke, and he will soon discover my true worth. My name is Tracy, a 49-year-old working housewife living with Howard. I've been working at my family's factory since graduating from university. Howard and I met during our university days, belonging to the same seminar. We only spoke about necessary academic matters and hardly spent any personal time together. However, as seniors, we began consulting each other about our thesis, which led to our friendship and eventually a romantic relationship. We got married soon after graduation. Now we have a son who is a working adult. He started living on his own after getting a job, but we still see each other once or twice a month. He always celebrates our birthdays and gives us presents on Father's Day and Mother's Day, which makes me happy. He's a wonderful son. However, I have some issues with Howard and his parents. Howard's parents are in their late 70s and live near us, but we rarely interact. Hey, it's time to consider living with my parents. They're getting older, and it worries me," Howard often suggests. I'm reminded of our past conflicts whenever he brings this up, which depresses me. How long are you going to hold on to the past? We're adults now. Can't you just let it go and start caring for my parents properly? Every time we discuss living together, the atmosphere grows tense, and the conversation ends with Howard getting angry, leaving things unresolved. The conflict, specifically with my mother-in-law, was created by her and Howard, and I couldn't accept it. I was appalled by their nerve, considering the terrible treatment I've received. Our relationship with my in-laws wasn't always bad. We used to get along well. "Tracy, let's go out together." "I want to go clothes shopping," my mother-in-law would say. I would normally accept such invitations on weekends, and we even had coffee and chatted afterward. When we went on trips, I would always bring back souvenirs, and we were close enough that they would give us vegetables and fruits, which made me feel like we were quite close. Everything changed after our son was born. I was struggling with my first childbirth and childcare, trying my best despite the confusion. I wanted to make my son happy as a mother, but it seemed like Howard just couldn't develop a sense of responsibility as a father. Throughout my pregnancy and even after giving birth, he hardly did anything to help. When I was immobilized by severe morning sickness, he would yell at me to hurry up and cook. Even when I said it was because I was worried about the baby, he would make me carry heavy things or do tasks that involved unstable footing, like changing light bulbs. When our son would cry at night, he wouldn't feed him, change his diapers, or even hold and soothe him. "Why won't you help at all?" "He's our child, so you should participate more in childcare." "And I wish you would do more housework too," I had cried out in frustration during moments of mental instability. But it seemed like nothing reached Howard's heart. Why should I have to do any housework?" he said with a sullen look and a sticky gaze. If I couldn't finish cleaning or have dinner ready by the time Howard got home because I was too busy, he would say, "You're just inefficient. A wife who can't even keep the house is useless. Take care of things around me properly. You're worthless," hurling verbal abuse at me. I was overwhelmed with caring for our small son, who still needed constant attention. Yet I was expected to also look after a fully grown adult. Every time Howard. Here's your passage broken into short paragraphs with punctuation. I was expected to look after a fully grown adult blamed me. It felt like thorns were being stuck into my heart. Not only Howard, but my mother-in-law became a source of stress too. I don't feel safe leaving it to her alone, so I'll take care of raising the successor properly, she declared. This and started visiting our house frequently. It might have been her way of showing kindness, but it was a huge nuisance for me. "Tracy, your way of doing things is completely wrong. You need to redo everything." She would nitpick everything I did, joining Howard in criticizing me. "Howard's right. You're just not cut out for this. A terrible wife, right? I wish you could do things a bit more properly." Even when I looked to my father-in-law for help, with their unsettling smiles, he remained indifferent, never scolding them or showing any affection for his grandson. Feeling unsupported by anyone, I became increasingly isolated within my in-laws' family. The only reason my spirit didn't break was because of the support from my own family. I spent days gritting my teeth and enduring, grateful for the help from my parents and siblings. Then one day, Howard's company went through layoffs due to poor performance, and he was among those let go. Supporting a family of 3 on my income alone was challenging. My parents offered support, helping us manage somehow. I couldn't keep relying on them. I introduced Howard to my father's factory, which manufactures specialty parts, and he started working there as a part-timer. I'm forever grateful to my parents and siblings. Despite our financial struggles, my mother-in-law's harassment only escalated. "We don't need a useless daughter-in-law like you." Mocked like this, there were times I wanted to leave, not just once or twice, but I couldn't bear the thought of taking my son away from his father, so I endured. As time passed and my son grew up, my mother-in-law's visits decreased. It seemed she didn't like that her adolescent grandson, now going through his rebellious phase, wouldn't listen to her anymore. Although it irked me, the decreased frequency of her visits and the consequent reduction in stress were a relief. It was as if her absence confirmed how much of a stressor she had been to me. I even felt moved by the peace I could finally enjoy. That we became estranged from Howard's family. Howard himself seemed to visit them often. However, the problem wasn't entirely gone. Howard remained a part-timer, and I continued to support our household financially. One day, when I was relaxing at home, the entrance became unusually noisy. Then rough footsteps approached. Howard was supposed to be at work? Could it be a burglar? As I braced myself, the living room door opened, and I was taken aback by the person who appeared. Howard, who was supposed to be at work, came back home, bringing his parents with him. "What about work? And why did you suddenly bring Mom and Dad here?" I whispered so that his parents couldn't hear. He looked at me with a bewildered expression, as if I was saying something absurd. "You wouldn't agree to live together, so I had to bring them here. You wouldn't say something as terrible as kicking them out, right?" His continued irrational decisions gave me a headache, and I pressed my hand against my temple. His parents sat on the sofa as if they owned the place, flipping through TV channels with the remote. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. But I couldn't just let them stay. The hurtful words my mother-in-law had said in the past played in my head, even though I didn't want to remember them. Living together would mean facing that kind of stress every day. The mere thought filled me with a vague fear of going insane. We need to renovate the house too. We have to make rooms for my parents to live in. Are you serious? Despite my astonishment, Howard laughed with his parents. They might be pleased with themselves for doing their filial duty, but inside, I was seething. What? It's only natural to take care of one's parents. You, as my wife, should do your part properly. His words made my mother-in-law nod in agreement, looking pleased. I pinched the bridge of my nose in frustration, trying not to let my expression fall apart in front of his parents, but it seemed impossible for Tracy. We'll make a tiny space. That should be enough for you, my mother-in-law said. Even after all this time, my mother-in-law hadn't changed for the better. Realizing that living with them would start my hell all over again, something inside me snapped. And who's going to pay for the renovation? Well, that would be Howard, of course. Howard was momentarily speechless, perhaps surprised by my unusually stern tone. My mother-in-law answered for him. Here's the continuation of your passage with short paragraphs and punctuation. But her response made me tilt my head in confusion. Howard, working part-time, couldn't possibly afford such a large expense. Do his parents not know about his job situation and our financial condition? Noticing my skeptical look, Howard hastily spoke up. Of course, after all, I'm the breadwinner here. That's right. While his mother beamed at his words, I felt both disappointed and empty. What breadwinner? Such lies would surely be exposed eventually. All right then, it's divorce. With a husband earning $7.92 per hour. I can't deal with you all anymore. Hey, what are you saying? What do you mean by hourly wage? Ignoring Howard's panicked reaction, I continued speaking calmly. Howard, who had always looked down on factory work and never put in any effort, remained on part-time status due to his unserious attitude and limited capabilities. So his hourly wage never increased. Despite my urging him to take his job seriously, he ignored me. He couldn't possibly afford the renovation. Moreover, since they made the decision without me, I had no obligation to pay. After I finished speaking, Howard and his mother fell silent, but my father-in-law smirked. What was so funny? As I wondered, the man who had been silent until now finally spoke. Don't make such a boring joke. Following his words, my mother-in-law regained her composure and started mocking me. They probably couldn't fathom their son being penniless. That's right, it must be a joke. You're actually being supported by Howard. What's true will eventually come to light. Without further engaging with them, I silently left the house and went back to my parents. Then I called my son. Sorry, I've decided to divorce Dad. I didn't provide a detailed explanation, but my son seemed to understand immediately. I see. You've been enduring all this time, haven't you? You don't have to suffer anymore. Hearing his kind words almost made me cry, but I managed to hold back and thanked him. My voice was shaking, which he might have noticed, but he didn't mention it until we ended the call. Feeling liberated, I sent the divorce papers to Howard. A few days later, he called me. Don't joke around. What's this divorce paper for? I wasn't joking at all. I was completely serious. No matter what he said, it was the manifestation of my intention to divorce. It was very loud, but the timing was perfect. I was discussing things with a lawyer, so I decided to call him in. However, he didn't come alone. For some reason, his parents also came with him. Anticipating that their presence would complicate matters, I had already decided on the divorce. So I wasn't about to start watching their faces and acting all nice now. I don't intend to divorce just because you sent me this. He tried to return the divorce papers to me, but I had no intention of accepting them. Their opinions seemed to differ, as his parents mockingly said, "What are you talking about? Just get divorced already." His father didn't say anything but grinned and nodded as if agreeing with his mother. My prediction of complications was spot on. They wouldn't even discuss dividing assets without saying, "We can't give Howard's precious assets to someone like you," making a proper conversation impossible. Every time I tried to speak, my in-laws would rudely interrupt with their selfish chatter. They were always self-centered, but they've become even more stubborn and unwilling to listen as they aged. Howard seemed overwhelmed and didn't try to stop them. Even the lawyer advised them to listen, but they wouldn't. Eventually, we decided not to divide any assets. However, this was the beginning of my in-laws' downfall. Here's the final part of your passage divided into short paragraphs with punctuation. My family has been wealthy since my grandfather's generation, owning not just one but several large factories. My great-grandfather, the founder, made sure his children and grandchildren wouldn't struggle by gifting us shares during his lifetime. Moreover, when Howard was laid off, my concerned parents hired me with a position and gifted me additional shares. Thanks to dividends, my annual income was about $1 million. On the contrary, Howard had no savings, so not dividing assets actually worked in my favor. If they had listened, there might have been a different path for them. I never mentioned this in front of him, though. This is how we got divorced. After spending time that couldn't even be called a discussion, Howard went to work as usual the next day. But something was off. His not working was nothing new, but he was oddly clingy. "Please, let's start over. I can't do anything without Tracy. I only said we should divorce because of my parents." He started crying and making a scene reminiscent of a child throwing a tantrum in a supermarket because they couldn't get candy. Seeing a grown man behave this way was unbearable. "Cancel the divorce, please. Can you not? You're getting in the way of work." "I won't move from here until you say you'll stop the divorce." He kept being selfish and disrupting my work. Other employees looked confused, not knowing what to do. Some were waiting for my instructions to proceed with their tasks, so it wasn't an exaggeration to say he was hindering the whole workplace, not just me. I took a deep breath. There was no other choice. I couldn't let this disrupt our work any further. Using my authority, I decided to fire Howard. Of course, firing him wasn't just to get through the moment. In fact, Howard had a history of poor behavior at work, including taking long breaks, hurling abuse when his mistakes were pointed out, and receiving numerous complaints from other employees. He also had a habit of laziness, often arriving late or not showing up at all for his mere 3 days of work per week. Despite my warnings, there was no improvement. I had gotten used to his behavior and let it slide, but today he was late again. It's probably why he was laid off from his previous job. "You're fired. Your presence here only disrupts the work, so please leave immediately and move out of the house we lived in together." That house was actually in my name, and I had planned to evict him upon our divorce. As I spoke calmly, tears started flowing from Howard's eyes again, his face becoming a mess with a runny nose. I looked away from him. There was no more mercy to be had. I hoped he would realize the trouble he had caused all this time. Realizing he couldn't overturn my decision, Howard solemnly left the factory. But the storm was far from over. The next day, my mother-in-law showed up at the workplace. "Cancel Howard's firing. You can't make such a decision based on your personal feelings alone, can you?" It was not at all just my personal feelings. I had clearly communicated this, but either she wasn't listening or refused to believe her son could be at fault. Knowing she wouldn't be satisfied with anything I said, I decided to resolve everything by calling in Howard, my father-in-law, and a lawyer to discuss again. Perhaps because Howard seemed so defeated and spoke little, his parents appeared more subdued than before. They looked at him worriedly, muttering something as if wanting to speak. First, let me explain that I am an officer managing the factory. I keep a close watch on the employees, and based on that, I decided to fire Howard. After revealing how I had been supporting the household, my in-laws finally seemed to take me seriously. Is that true, Howard? It seemed more like they believed because Howard nodded than my explanation. Though slightly irritated, it was far better than being railed at as before. Wait, what about the renovation? So Howard can't pay for it. Oh dear, we've already paid the deposit and started the work. My mother-in-law became frantic, her face paling. They had been counting on Howard's earnings to pay the rest, having spent all their savings on the renovation deposit. But that's no longer my concern. I'm focusing on my work and enjoying living alone. As for the house renovation started by my in-laws, I decided to continue paying for the work already begun. I felt bad for the workers, and since the house was already under construction, it needed to be finished to be livable. Of course, I canceled the renovation plans made by my in-laws, intending to remodel it into a comfortable home for myself. Thankful for adding guest rooms for my son, parents, and siblings to stay over. It seems fun. I'm excited to erase the bad memories of living with Howard and make everything new, designing the house on my days off.